There is a plant that most people in Britain have never heard of, and its seed can carry more protein by dry weight than a cut of beef. It asks for no field, no fertilizer, and no direct sun. On your windowsill it goes from a dry seed to a harvest you can eat in about 5 days. NASA looked at it for feeding astronauts on long missions. The United Nations once called it one of the most promising food crops of the 20th century. And then, somehow, it slipped out of Western memory almost entirely. A single shallow box in a window can give you fresh protein right through the year, and by the end of the next few minutes you will know exactly how it is done. I want you to try a small experiment this week. Walk into any supermarket and give yourself 1 minute in the meat aisle. Watch the people at the chiller. You will see the same small drama play out again and again. Somebody lifts a pack of mince, looks at the price sticker, does a quick sum in their head, and puts it back down. It is not only the money, it is the look on the face, the little calculation, the working out of what the week can stretch to. Protein has become dear, and everybody feels it. But 3 streets from that same shop, on somebody's windowsill, a person is growing protein with no land, no animals, no fridge, and no supply chain behind it. Just a shallow tray and a bit of tap water. The plant behind this has a feature that sounds almost made up. Its pods carry 4 long ridges, 4 wings running the length of them, frilled at the edges like the fins of some strange fish, and that is exactly why botanists named it Sophocarpus tetragonalobus. We call it the winged bean, though you may also hear it called the goa bean, the 4-angled bean, or the asparagus pea. In the Philippines it goes by names that shift from one province to the next. Across Indonesia and the rest of Southeast Asia, it turns up in the markets under other names again. In Papua New Guinea, where people have grown it for well over 2,000 years, it carries dozens of names, and every one of them stands for generations of cooking, soil, weather, and getting through the lean months. A plant does not gather that many names by accident. It gathers them by mattering, by feeding people, year after year, long enough for the language itself to make room for it. My name is Malcolm Ashby, and for 60 years I have grown my own food and foraged wild plants. So if that is the sort of thing you want more of, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Now let me show you why this odd 4-winged bean deserves a spot on your kitchen sill, and why the people who sell us our food would rather you never found out. The West nearly forgot it, but science did not forget it completely. In 1975, the National Academy of Sciences gathered a panel of agricultural scientists in Washington. Their job was simple enough on paper. Find the underused tropical plants that carried real, exceptional promise, the ones that had slipped through the cracks of modern agriculture, while the world poured all its attention into a mere handful of staple crops. They worked through hundreds of candidates, weighing each one for its nutrition, its hardiness, and how easily an ordinary grower might take it up. The winged bean was one they singled out for close attention. The report that came from that work was published in 1981, and it used language you rarely see in a scientific document. They called the winged bean a supermarket on a stalk. That phrase stuck, and it stuck for a good reason, because very nearly every part of the plant can be eaten. When a plant hands you a shop's worth of different foods from a single stem, you begin to see why sober scientists reached for such a vivid turn of phrase. Let me walk you through it. The young pods, picked while they are still tender and their 4 wings are crisp, taste much like a good green bean, and they cook down in minutes. The mature seeds carry protein to rival the soybean. The leaves give you nutrition in the same league as spinach, and you can pick them through the whole growing season without ever setting the plant back. Even the flowers go in the pot, and they carry a faint mushroom sweetness, a pale blue bloom that cooks quite pretty. And then the part almost nobody in the West ever sees, the underground tubers, the swollen roots hidden beneath the soil, which can reach around 20% protein. To put that in its place, a common potato sits at about 5%. So for the very same weight of harvest, the tuber of the winged bean can hand you roughly 4 times the protein of an ordinary spud, and unlike most tubers, it does not go watery and bland, but keeps a nutty firmness when it is cooked. One plant feeding you from the tip of its shoots right down to its roots, and asking almost nothing of you in return. But the real headline is in the seed. Laboratory work published in food science journals has measured the protein in the winged bean seed at somewhere between 29 and 42%, depending on the variety. Beef, taken by dry weight, usually lands around 26%. Sit with that for a moment. A plant seed, dried and weighed, standing shoulder to shoulder with animal muscle for protein density, and in many varieties beating it outright. We are so used to being told that meat is the serious protein and that plants are the poor cousin, the thing you eat when you cannot afford the real stuff. And here is a humble bean, grown in a back garden in the tropics for thousands of years, outdoing the steak on the very measure the steak is meant to win, and doing it without any fuss at all. That fact alone should have set off a revolution in how we feed ourselves, and yet it did not. The question worth asking is why. Part of the answer is another feature that makes this bean even more awkward for the industrial way of doing things. It is a legume, and it fixes its own nitrogen. Down in its roots it forms little nodules where bacteria live, and those bacteria pull nitrogen straight out of the air and turn it into food the plant can use. Any gardener who has grown peas or broad beans knows the principle. You pull the plant at the end of the season, and the roots come up studded with pale pink swellings, and every one of them has been feeding nitrogen back into your soil. The winged bean does the very same thing, and it does it generously. In plain terms, it feeds itself. Less need for bagged fertilizer, less leaning on the industrial chain, fewer things to buy again and again, and a crop that asks for fewer inputs from outside. It is not, if we are honest, the kind of crop anyone is in a hurry to sell you. For a while it looked as though the world had noticed. In the 1980s, agricultural research stations across the tropics started serious programs. Centres in Asia bred improved varieties. Stations in Nigeria and India tested ways of growing it. Agricultural bodies pushed the winged bean forward as a candidate for shoring up protein in diets where meat is either costly or comes and goes. For a moment it truly seemed the winged bean was about to change how the world got its protein. Then the interest cooled. The money moved. Programs were wound down and shut. Researchers followed the funding on to other projects, the way researchers must, and the winged bean went back to the places it had always belonged, where it had never once gone away. Across Southeast Asia it carried on being grown, just as it always had been, in backyards, in kitchen gardens, and in the local markets, climbing up bamboo canes and over fences while the wider world looked the other way. But the promised revolution never took root in the fields of Europe or North America, and the reason has far more to do with money than with biology. It was never that the plant failed us, it was that it did not fit the shape of the business we had built around our food. In a warm climate, the winged bean can behave like a perennial. You plant it the once, and it comes back year on year. It makes a good part of its own fertility. Once it is established, it asks for very little. Every single one of those qualities makes it a gift for food security, and every single one of them makes it a poor prospect for an industry built on selling you seeds, fertilizer, and chemicals over and over. A plant that looks after itself is a hard thing to build a business around. But here is the part almost nobody bothers to tell you. You do not need a tropical farm to get at the best of this bean. You do not need soil. You do not need a plot of land. And for the neatest version of it at home, you do not even need direct sunlight. What you need to understand is germination, because the real secret is not only in the plant, it is in what happens the moment a seed wakes up. When a seed germinates, its whole chemistry shifts. Enzymes that lay dormant come to life. Starches break down into simple sugars, which is why a sprout tastes faintly sweet where the dry seed tasted of nothing much at all. Proteins turn more digestible. Vitamins are built up from the raw materials the seed was holding. The seed stops being a little larder and becomes a living thing bent on growing. And in that change lies everything that makes a sprout worth more to you than the seed it came from. Research in food chemistry journals has tracked these changes and put real numbers to them. Take trypsin inhibitors, the compounds that get in the way of protein digestion and sit in the seed as a natural defense. They are the reason you cannot simply chew a raw, dry bean and expect to get much good from it. During germination, they can drop sharply, sometimes by 60 to 80%, depending on the method and the timing. That armor is useful while the seed is dormant and simply trying to survive, keeping it safe from the insects and the gut of any animal that might swallow it. But once it germinates, the priority becomes growth, and that chemical armor is switched off. Vitamin C tells an even more striking story. A dry seed holds very little of it, next to none at all. But after several days of sprouting, the content can climb dramatically. In winged bean sprouts, rises of up to 600% have been reported around the 5th day under the right conditions. Think on that. A food that carried almost no vitamin C when it went into the jar comes out a few days later, carrying a real dose of it, built from nothing but water and time. The seed manufactures that vitamin as it readies itself for active life, and you get to harvest that rise at just the right moment. Protein digestibility improves too, climbing from around 65% in the raw seed to more than 85% in the sprout. That means you are not just eating protein on paper. Your body takes up more of what is actually there. In effect, the sprouting does a share of the digestive work for you before you ever lift a fork, softening the seed's defenses and unlocking the goodness that a dry bean keeps locked away. And here is the window that matters, the point of greatest density between day 4 and day 5. By then the cotyledons, the first 2 little structures that push out of the seed, have already swelled and opened. They still hold the original goodness packed into the grain. But now, with the improvements germination has brought, not much energy has yet been poured away into long stems and reaching roots. Think of it as a ledger. Everything the sprout has gained by waking up is still there in the seed leaves, and it has not yet been spent on the business of climbing toward light it does not need. Day 4 to day 5 is usually the moment to harvest, with the best texture and the best value for the volume you have grown. Leave it later, and the plant starts spending that goodness on getting tall, sending down long roots and pushing up a thin stem, and what you gain in size, you lose in richness and in flavor. Catch it at the peak, and you get the best of both, the tenderness of a young sprout and the full nourishment of the seed it grew from. So let me give you the method, and it truly is about 5 minutes of work a day in any kitchen. First, get hold of your seeds. In Asian food shops in a good many towns, the winged bean is sold dry, sometimes under names like goa bean or four-angled bean or asparagus pea. There are online sellers too, and seed exchange networks that offer untreated seed meant for sprouting. A kilogram usually costs very little set against the same weight of animal protein, and it yields dozens of harvests. You are not buying a single meal, you are buying cycles, one after another. Second, give them a quick look over. Go through the seeds and pull out any that are cracked, very dark, visibly mouldy, or damaged in any way. A damaged seed is the open door that lets fungus in. This takes half a minute, and it can spare you a whole week of a failed batch. Third, soak them. Put the seeds in a glass jar or a bowl and cover them with room temperature water. Use roughly 3 times as much water as seed because they will drink it up and swell. If some seeds sit only half wetted, they will germinate unevenly, and uneven germination is what brings odd smells and mould. Let them soak for 12 to 24 hours. That range matters. Too little time gives you poor germination. Too long, and you invite bacteria. Fourth, drain them right off. Rinse with fresh water, then drain again. The golden rule could not be simpler. Never leave standing water sitting around the seeds. Fifth, use a container that drains. It can be a proper sprouting tray, a window box with holes in the bottom, a colander lined with a cloth, or any perforated tray you have. The container itself matters far less than the drainage. Standing water is the perfect home for mould, and drainage is what keeps it away. Sixth, put it in the right spot. Keep the container out of direct sunlight. Sprouts do better in indirect light, or even in shade. Direct sun heats the mass of seed, speeds up bacterial growth, and can leave you with a bitter taste. A worktop set back from the window works nicely. A cupboard with the door left ajar works just as well. Seventh, rinse twice a day, morning and night. Use room temperature water. Give the seeds a gentle shake so every one of them gets wetted, then drain them thoroughly. Each rinse washes away the waste the seeds give off and folds in fresh oxygen. Skipping a rinse is the quickest way to end up with a batch that smells wrong. Eighth, mind the temperature, because germination changes a great deal with the warmth of the room. Somewhere between 20 and 30 degrees Celsius is usually ideal. Below that, growth slows right down. Above it, contamination creeps up. Most homes fall inside that band at some point in the day. If your kitchen turns very hot in summer, find a cooler corner. If everything is cold in winter, keep the seeds off the icy window pane and find a mild spot instead. Now, keep an eye on the markers as the days pass, because they hand you the control. On day 2, you will see root tips nosing out of the seed. On day 3, the roots lengthen and the cotyledons start to part. On day 4, the cotyledons swell and take on a pale green or yellow colour. On day 5, they reach their fullest, just before the stem begins to stretch and spend the plant's energy elsewhere. Harvest by snipping the sprouts off at the base, or by lifting the whole mat if you grew them in a tray. Rinse the harvest and drain it well. Store it in the fridge in a container with a sheet of kitchen paper to soak up the spare moisture. Kept properly, they hold for 5 to 7 days, though the best flavour and texture are usually within the first 48 hours. And here is the trick that turns this from a one-off into a steady supply. Start your next batch on the very same day you harvest the last. With 2 containers on the go in rotation, you have fresh protein without a break, 5 minutes a day, no seasons to wait on, no weather to depend on, and no need to wait for the price of meat to come down. Now let us do the sums, because this is where a bean becomes a system. A standard 12-inch window box over a 5-day cycle can give you a volume of sprouts that, worked back to dry matter, may reach around 100 grams under sensible conditions. If we take a protein content of roughly 35%, that is about 35 grams of protein a cycle, 6 cycles a month, more than 200 grams in a month, and more than 2 kilograms of protein in a year, all of it coming from one window. Set that against meat. To get 2 kilograms of protein from beef, you raise an animal for 18 to 24 months. That animal eats tons of feed, much of it grain that people could have eaten instead. It needs water, and a great deal of it, land, veterinary care, transport, slaughter, infrastructure, refrigeration, and distribution. Every one of those steps has a cost, and every one of those costs finds its way onto the sticker you frown at in the aisle. Your box needs tap water, a container, and a small daily habit. And the contrast is not only about logistics, it runs deeper than that. Meat leans on systems that break easily, on fuel, refrigeration, transport, feed prices, and simple availability. When any one of those links strains, the price on the shelf jumps, and there is nothing you can do at the counter but put the pack back down. Home sprouting leans on 2 things that rarely vanish even in a crisis: water and time. If you have seeds, you have a protein bank. If you have a container, you have a factory. Not an industrial one, mind, a biological one, running on your worktop, powered by nothing more than the life already folded up inside the seed. This is what food sovereignty actually looks like. It is not bunkers, and it is not stacks of ultra-processed tins bought in a panic. Sovereignty means being able to produce the essential part of your own nutrition inside your own home through a plain and repeatable skill that no shortage and no price rise can take away from you. Once you know how to wake a seed, you carry that knowledge for life, and it costs you nothing to use it again and again. And that is exactly why the winged bean stands as such a sharp symbol of an uncomfortable truth. Real, tested solutions do not become mainstream if they do not fit the profit shape of the supply chain. A thing that a family can do for itself, cheaply, in a jar on the sill, is a thing nobody has much reason to advertise. The winged bean waited while the West looked past it. It waited while money chased after products it could patent. It waited while enormous markets were built for single nutrients packed into capsules. It waited while prices climbed and families stood in the meat aisle doing their sums. A seed does not understand markets. It understands water, temperature, and time. Give it those three things, and it turns from dormant storage into living nourishment, from a forgotten crop into a kitchen staple, from an agricultural oddity into food security you hold in your own hands. So there it is, a bean the West nearly threw away, sitting quiet in the markets of Southeast Asia the whole while, waiting for anyone to look. You do not need a farm, you do not need a field, you do not even need the sun. You need a handful of seed, a container that drains, and 5 honest minutes of your day. If you start your first batch, come back and tell me which day you harvested and how it tasted, because knowledge only becomes real when it moves off the screen and into your kitchen. What happens next rests on a box in your window and a few minutes of your attention each day, and I think you will be glad you gave it